T. We have with us Allen
Reece.
Allen Lee. I'm sorry, I'm a little flustered. We have with us Allen Lee, class of 2002. So I'll take you all through what's going to happen for today's Spill the Tea. I'll do a brief moment of silence. I'll give you Allen's introduction. I will ask him a few questions, and then I will open it up to the students who are on the line to also ask questions. Are you okay with that, Allen?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. So like I said, we're going to start with a moment of silence. Okay, so Allen Lee is the Vice President and Trust Specialist with the Retirement and Personal Wealth Solutions Group at Merrill Lynch. In this role, he works with financial advisors at Merrill Lynch to help them offer sophisticated legacy planning and philanthropic strategies to their clients, including nonprofit entities. Allen is knowledgeable in the latest estate planning, wealth transfer, and charitable gifting strategies, with over a decade of experience in comprehensive estate and financial planning. Using this knowledge and this experience, he works with clients and their financial advisors to help structure efficient strategies to pursue their short and long-term personal and financial goals. Prior to joining Merrill Lynch, Allen worked as a trust and estates attorney in an Indianapolis private practice and as a financial advisor at both Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank, Alex Brown. Thank you for joining us, Allen.
Happy to join you guys.
So can you take us through your journey, more specifically your timeline of how you got to this point as a vice president and trust specialist?
Sure. So I came out of Earlham in one of the economic recessions. 2002 was after the market crash, sort of the tech bubble burst. And so it was, jobs were thin on the ground. So what I did is I actually did Teach for America right out of undergrad in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And then from there, I decided to go to grad school. So I got a graduate degree in something that is not particularly relevant to what I currently do, in evolutionary and adaptive systems, which is like a field of computer science over in the UK. And then I came back and took a job with Morgan Stanley in DC, working with foundations and endowments primarily, mostly 501c C6s, which are like industry associations because they're all in DC. And so I did sort of financial planning for those nonprofit organizations. From there, I took a gig with a buddy of mine in Houston with Deutsche Bank and was there until 2008 when the market crashed again. And I thought it would be a really good time to go to law school. So I went to law school at Michigan and then came out and just did trust and estate work ever since, because my thinking was the nice thing about people is they always die. So there's always a need for estate planning. And it sort of integrates my interest in financial stuff as well. So I did trust and estate work for a while until this position opened up about 3 years ago. And this lets me, so I sit in Chicagoland, and I'm basically the middleman between the financial advisors at Merrill Lynch, of which there are many, and the trust administration arm of our organization, the trust services arm of what used to be U.S. Trust, which is now Bank of America Trust Services. So I'm kind of a liaison between those two different groups, and they speak very different languages. So frequently what I do is I play translator between the fiduciary trust mindset of the trust company and the more sort of aggressive acquisition mindset of the advisors with Merrill Lynch. So that's sort of how I got here and what I do.
Thank you. So would you say that coming from a liberal arts college where you had to do a lot of interdisciplinary work, has that helped you in the job that you have now and going between those two very separate entities?
Uh, so here's what I would say. I think the most valuable skill coming out of Earlham is the ability to approach questions and problems from a couple different directions. I suppose you could say that is interdisciplinary, but I just think of it as more of a critical thinking skill. So I did undergrad in philosophy, which is effectively unemployable, but it teaches you how to think about problems in interesting ways, and I think that that's helpful. The other thing that's going to be really important, that I think is really important, that when going into any sort of corporate environment, is the ability to sort of code shift and speak to different groups in different ways. So there's a certain way of being at Earlham. There's a certain way of communicating, of phrasing things, that is not a way of speaking in the world that is universal. And the ability to get out of that way of communicating, engaging, and getting to another way. I mean, folks who come from backgrounds that are not typical, having the ability to shift the way you communicate and engage with folks. I mean, the classic example is the African American community, being able to code shift into different groups and to speak in different ways. I think that's tremendously valuable, because very often what you're doing is you're having to shift into a way of speaking, communicating with one group, and that's very different than with the other group. And I think that that's very helpful in different majors, right? There's different ways of talking about problems. The psychologists talk about stuff one way. The sociologists, the biologists talk about the same problem in a slightly different way. There's different language, there's different jargon, there's different shorthands, and being able to sort of shift gears, I think is very helpful.
Okay. So if you were
I don't know if that answers your question directly.
It does. It does. Thank you. If you could do Earlham again, then would you have taken more science courses as opposed, well, not opposed to, but in conjunction with your humanities courses as well?
I mean, if I could do it all over again, I'd take more math classes, and I would invite everyone to take more math classes. You can never have too much math, regardless of what you do, and it's going to be a competitive advantage against your peers who decide not to do so. I mean, that's what I would advise anybody, regardless of major. I mean, if you're an English major, take math classes. Being able to engage in that sort of process of thinking through and being able to demonstrate things and being able to express things about the world in ways that can be translated and communicated to others is very valuable, and business runs by numbers. So being able to, use numbers to make arguments is tremendously powerful.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So I have a few students here on the call, listening on the call, who are potentially interested into going into finance. Can you tell us what a typical day looks like for you?
I mean, we're all stuck at home, so it's atypical. I mean, I think most people in most jobs spend their day with phone calls and emails, right? That's what everybody does, and working with systems with regard to those phone calls and emails. I mean, in normal times, and in the before times, before this pandemic, what I would do is a combination of phone calls and emails, and then in-person meetings with clients and advisors. Meeting with advisors, sort of articulating the value prop of what we do, and meeting with clients and doing the same thing, but in ways that are easier to understand, and framing the argument as to what we do and how we help differently depending on the circumstances. So it's basically just talking to people. Most jobs are just talking to people and trying to figure out how you can help them. So that's really what my day is.
Okay. Can you tell our students who are interested in going into your field, I think probably they would assume that they should take business and economics and finance classes, and as you said, math classes. But paired with the math classes, is there anything else that they can do at Earlham that would probably make them more, make them come out ahead of their peers or make them really unique to the applicant pool?
Sure. So coming right out of the bat, you have a disadvantage going to Earlham, not because Earlham isn't good. Earlham is good. The education is excellent. The issue is that Earlham is small and Earlham is not well known. And so you're starting at a disadvantage because people do not understand the value that you're bringing to the table. So one thing that's always a good idea is get internships early and often, right? If you can be a person as opposed to just a name, you're going to differentiate yourself. That's important. The extent to which you could take internships anywhere near the area that you want to be or at the company you want to be, that's going to help. The other, and also it sort of depends on where you are in your educational career. So there are many organizations out there that have many universities that have very clear pipelines into certain organizations. Very large companies go to very big universities where the education maybe isn't as good as Earlham, but then they're going to say, we're going to hire this many people out of this school, this many people out of this school. Depending on how aggressively you want to pursue this, you may, and I'm not sure this is something to say on a call, you might consider transferring to one of those schools before your last year so that you can tap into that pipeline of getting into those schools. It doesn't mean they're any better. They're likely not, particularly large schools. I mean, those huge classes are not a place where you want to be. You're not going to really learn a lot, but your giant organization show up at the giant schools and they hire they skim off the top and hire folks out of there. That's one way to do it. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be the person who's throwing a resume over the wall to sort of an online application process, because then you're just one of a gazillion people and no one's actually going to physically look at your resume. They're going to run character recognition on the words that you have entered, and that's how they're going to pull you out. Actually, that's a good idea. So when you're applying to these positions and you're applying online, look at the job description and literally take the exact words in the job description and use those exact words in your resume, because there's just an expert system that's scanning through that and trying to pull out keywords. And that will at least get you through the first call. So I think that's worthwhile to do. Basically restate your experience in the language of the job application itself and in the job description itself so that you get flagged for the character recognition. The other option I would say is look at smaller institutions, smaller financial institutions, because generally they are going to not have those same plugins to those large universities in the same way that the large financial institutions will. And so there's more opportunities there to separate yourself out from the pack and sort of differentiate yourself. I mean, if you go to a small local bank and walk in and just have an informational interview with a number of people there, and you can sort of describe what you're interested in, what you can do, and how you can help, I think that in the event that there's an opening between now and when you graduate, that you're going to be better positioned to get those jobs than someone who has not done so. I mean, I hate it when baby boomers say, just put the shoe leather on and go door to door. I think most of the time that's a terrible idea and a waste of time. But if there's specific organizations you want to work for and you can go and have a conversation saying, I would like to work here. Here's why. Here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to be graduating in a year, 2 years, or 3 years. I would love to come in here and do an unpaid internship or volunteer or contribute in some way because I would like to be here in a year or 2 years or 3 years. I think that that's something most people don't do. And that would be a great way to get your foot in the door, because the trickiest thing is getting your foot in the door. Once you're there, I mean, there's a lot of people that work at a lot of institutions who are not very good at their jobs. And if you're halfway decent, once you're there, you've got an opportunity to move up. The trick is getting in. Getting in is the tricky part. So, sorry, that was a long answer.
No, it was great. There was a lot of great information in there. What I took from that was that relationship building with maybe smaller companies for an Earlham student is going to be very important for them. But also it was good to hear you talk about the applicant tracking system, because I try to impress upon my students the importance of really mirroring the job description that they're going for and using that verbiage. So thank you for that.
Yeah, everybody. The basic assumption is that most people in most places don't know what they're doing, and that includes hiring. No one really knows how to hire correctly, right? And so they rely on very large companies that build systems that say they can help. And usually those very large systems are basically mechanically processing the vast number of applications for any given position. There's no thinking involved there. So again, you're just trying to sort of jump through the hoops that are put in front of you. Right.
Thank you. I am going to ask you a couple more questions and then I'll open it up to the students who are on the call. So the finance industry, can you tell us how it is changing, how you see it changing, or what do you think changes might be in the future in the face of COVID-19?
Oh, well, that's a big question. I can't speak to the finance industry as a whole, but I can speak to my very small subsegment of the area that I sit, which is that at my firm, what happened a little while ago during the last financial crisis was Bank of America acquired Merrill Lynch because Merrill Lynch had too much bad debt and was in a bad way. And so what's happened since that time is they have basically toned down the more cowboy aspect of it and turned it more into a normal financial services business. And that's happening with financial services, advisor-based financial services across the board. Regulation is going up, compliance is going up, oversight's going up because it was the Wild West 20 years ago, and that's not great, and that exposes firms to a lot of risk, and banks don't like unsystematic risk. And so the extent to which they can tamp that down, they are very keen on doing so. If I had to bet on what the finance industry looks like in the future, at least on my side, the sort of advisory side of the wall, you're going to see more integration, more comprehensive services, because the idea with advisor-based financial services is you're charging a premium, and so you need to find a way to justify that premium. And generally, a good way to justify the premium is to provide comprehensive integrated advice in a way that competitors can't. And so you're going to see more comprehensive planning. You're going to see tax, legal, and financial being more integrated into comprehensive plans. And you're probably going to see differentially the folks who are going to win that race. Because right now, tax firms want to do financial services firms want to do some degree tax and legal, and law firms, they would love to be able to annuitize their business in a way that they can't right now. So everyone's racing to the same place, and the issue is that banks relative to their peers just have an ungodly geyser of money getting dumped out of those checking accounts, because banking is so tremendously more profitable than any other industry that it's not even funny. I mean, people are paying banks to hold their money, and then the banks take that money and they invest it, right? And interest rates are zero right now. So banks are people are getting paid nothing to put their money in banks. So I would say you're going to see more integration. You're going to see more consolidation. You're going to see the winners winning more and really outpacing their competitors that are mid-size or smaller. That's what I would guess, but I mean, I don't have a crystal ball.
Okay.
And with regard to COVID particularly, I suspect what you're going to see is, again, the big guys who have a lot of money to throw at problems are able to provide solutions to folks in ways that their peers that are smaller cannot. And so when you have major market disruptions, major economic disruptions, having a big pile of cash to pull from to do stuff, to solve problems is tremendously helpful. I mean, we were able to flip from a normal sort of in-person to a work from home very remarkably well. I suspect folks at smaller firms that don't have the same technology budget just can't do that. And so they can't compete, they can't transition as quickly. And so, I mean, it's that classic sort of the winners have an inherent advantages, so they end up winning more. It's completely unfair, but that's how things tend to work. I suspect you're going to see more of that. What would be interesting is post-election, assuming Joe Biden wins, assuming Democrats take control of the Senate, which is likely going to happen. I mean, it's no guarantee, but that's the way it looks like it's going. What I suspect you are going to see is you're going to see more regulation, I would hope so, from Elizabeth Warren to try to sort of rein in the more aggressive practices of places like Wells Fargo. Regulation's sort of taken a hiatus during the Trump presidency, regulation in general, but banking regulation. I suspect when Democrats take back control, you're going to see a little bit more reins put on, which I think is probably good for the economy as a whole. So I'm giving long answers to questions. I hope that's okay.
These are great answers, Alan. These are great answers. Can you tell us if you are you reading any business journals or anything in the morning, or do you have any reading material that are your go-to, like get ready for the day?
Man, it would be better if my answer was yes. No, I don't read the journal because in my experience, this type of stuff I do is ideally very long term. So I'm interested in sort of changes in legislation or changes in tax law. Like again, the Biden upcoming tax proposals, right, where he's going to cut in half the estate tax exemption from 11 and change down to 5.5 per person. He's going to eliminate the step-up in basis. He's going to tax unrealized cap gains at death. I mean, that's a big deal for the folks that we deal with, because usually financial services firms, when they're dealing with individual clients, are dealing with rich people, right? Because that's where the money is. And so, and they want to convey assets in the most tax efficient way possible. So yeah, that's stuff I'm interested in and want to stay on top of. But regular sort of daily market movements in the journal, like it's just too volatile, and it's not long term enough. So most of the time, it's not super relevant to what I do. I read Harvard Business Review a fair bit, because I think that that's sort of long-term strategic planning and positioning, and there's a font of really good ideas in there that you can kind of harvest and bring up, and if particularly inside the organization, as you're looking to navigate and move up, being able to say, hey, here's a different way of looking at things. Here's an article I read. Here's a way of approaching a problem. I think that depending on who the folks you're working with are, is pretty valuable.
Okay. Can you tell us what students can do right now to kind of start looking at their financial future and in terms of retirement? Because I know that wasn't on my mind when I graduated from Earlham, but it should have been.
Everyone says that you should max out your IRAs or your 401ks when you start. That's absolutely true. That said, right when you're coming out of school, you're basically, you're particularly if you're in a larger city that's expensive. I mean, you're living on ramen and tying broken shoelaces together so you don't starve to death. So like, even though people tell you that, it's real hard to implement. The benefit of maxing out your 401k is at least you never see the dollars in front of you, so you're not inclined to spend them. One of the cool things about money is that it compounds, and compound interest is super powerful. So every dollar you save in your 20s is worth so much more than a dollar you save in your 30s, which is worth so much more than a dollar you save in your 40s. Because that $1, some of you guys probably know this, the rule of 72 is basically at a 7% rate of return, money doubles every 10 years. So if you save $1 in your 20s, and it doubles in your 30s to $2, and then it grows to $4, and then it grows to $8. So you get a long enough time horizon, you get some significant compounding over those dollars. And so, I mean, I actually did the math. I looked at this for my daughter, who's 12, looking to get her start babysitting and just kind of putting babysitting money away. If she babysits from like 14 to 18 and charges, like $10-15 an hour, and just sticks that in a Roth IRA, she'll be a millionaire by the time she retires without saving any other dollars. So babysitting dollars can get you over $1 million by the time you retire, just from compounding.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, save early and often. But that said, it's really easy to say that. It's real hard to do because you work, spend the money that you make, and yeah. So I will say, everyone will tell you that. Most people don't do it because it's really hard. I mean, it's like, living below your means. It's going to depend drastically on where you live. I mean, if you're in a starter job living in a big city, unless you live in a place that's not particularly safe, it's really difficult to earn enough and save enough and not, starve to death. So even though I'll say do that, recognize that most folks don't do that in their 20s. Most folks spend everything there, and they shouldn't, but they do. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world.
Don't do that. I did that, guys. For those of you who are on the call, don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, so I'm going to open it up for students to now ask you questions, should they have any. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. I don't bite, I promise.
Okay.
Look, hi, Allen. Thanks for coming today. I really enjoyed you speaking earlier, but just have a quick question. I want to ask you.
What's your name?
I'm Rand Salbert. I'm a senior. I'm a global management major with a minor in politics. And I just had a quick question about how's your experience with Teach for America? Do you think individuals should take opportunities such as this during this time? during
Oh,
during graduation?
unfortunately, so that's a really loaded question, unfortunately, because my experience with Teach for America wasn't ideal. So here's the thing. I think that, man, there's a couple ways to answer that. So I guess the first thing would be, I think it is an exercise a little bit in, I don't know, almost it feels like intercountry colonialism, right? Where you take these kids coming out of, historically coming out of these high prestige schools, usually coming from really good socioeconomic backgrounds, and then putting them in areas of the country that have historically been underserved, with the assumption that, hey, teaching's not that hard. We can give a kid 6 weeks of training and they'll be just as good as teachers that have gone to, who've grown up in the community and have contributed and understand the culture and the circumstances. That it's a little, if you think about it from a 30,000 view, gee whiz, that's a really condescending conclusion to reach, right? Like, also, I think practically it is what Teach for America folks all struggle with is classroom management, because they're not trained in it. They're not given a lot of tools. I mean, spending a few weeks of training in the summer before you're getting deployed to these schools in very difficult socioeconomic circumstances, you're going to be overwhelmed. And the dropout rate in Teach for America is a manifestation of that. If you look at the history of it, I mean, basically it's the funding for Teach for America very often comes from the same folks who are aggressively funding the school choice. It's not inherently conservative, but it operates on the assumption that teaching is just not that hard, which I promise you is not true. Teaching is exceptionally hard, and when you have kids that have grown up with not enough resources, where there's not enough mental health care, where the kids are going hungry at night, I mean, teaching is difficult under normal circumstances. Under the circumstances where kids are deployed for Teach for America is exceptionally difficult. I mean, when I was teaching, I had a kid who very clearly had undiagnosed severe mental health issues, like psychosis. Like, he did not have a connection with reality, but there were just no resources to serve him. So he was in my class. On good days, he could stay within the scope of, functioning, but on bad days, it was untenable. And when he brought weapons into the class, I mean, it's just, I don't think the Teach for America actually does a very good job of solving the problem that it's intended to solve. Instead, it functions more like, almost like long-term tourism for economically disenfranchised areas for kids who very often come from positions of privilege, so that it serves as fodder for stories about, I did this, I did that, in later years. I don't know that it actually solves the problem it intends to solve. Even though I don't doubt the intentions of the person who created it. I think her intentions were great. I just don't know that it actually works very well. It's like the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps sounds really cool and it's a great idea, but practically speaking, I don't know that it actually creates a substantive amount of good in the world. All right. But to answer your question, should you do it? Does that help with jobs? I don't know that it necessarily does. Now, I think maybe it did early on when Teach for America was associated with the Ivy League schools that they pulled kids out of, but now it's sufficiently large and deployed that I don't know that it really differentiates you in a meaningful way from other folks applying for jobs. So, I mean, if you feel a calling to do it, that's great. I don't know that it's going to help you that much. If your goal is to use that to differentiate yourself and get a better job coming out. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes. Thanks so much.
Anybody else? Oh man, I scared the rest of them.
I have a question. My name is Aaron Crichton. I'm a global management major as well, economics minor. Really, one question I wanted to ask you is, what are some certifications that, I guess like at our age we could like look towards getting to attain?
Yeah, that's a great question. Depends on what you want to do. Okay, so for me, if you are looking to get a gig at a finance firm, the gold standard, I think, well, it depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to be an advisor, a designation is not going to make a huge amount of difference, but you can always get a CFP if you want to. But there's a lot of CFPs out there, but it's a good designation. It's not bad. But you really need to want to be a financial advisor if you want to do that. If you want to get into the wheels of finance, a CFP is not going to help you much. What's a great designation though is a CFA. It's also a pain in the butt to get. and it's really hard, but it's really worthwhile because people know what that means. And if you want to get like an investment management, if you want to get to that, you know, or even a trading desk, like if you want to get to the sort of climb the mountain, so to speak, having a CFA designation is, I think, very meaningful. The issue is it takes you at least 2 years to get, and they only have pass rates of like 40% or less for the first 2 levels. There's 3 levels you got to take and pass. It's really hard. It takes a long time, but it's the gold standard in terms of designations. And if you have that, they will know that, you know, you have a general idea that you know what you're doing. People will often get that in lieu of an MBA if they want to be in financial services, because you don't need both. If you have a CFA, you've demonstrated you know how to add and subtract, right? And you know how to do math, and you understand the basics of accounting. I would do that. Just recognize it's a big hill to climb. CFA is a chartered financial analyst, if anyone's interested. And you can Google it. The CFA Institute's got a website. They'll tell you all about it.
Thank you.
Hey, Alan, have you ever thought about owning or starting your own practice? If not, do you have any reasons on why you haven't, or why you shouldn't?
Practice of what? Practice of law? Practice
Yes.
of financial. What practice
Yes,
of what?
estate planning, and I guess law too.
I mean, I suppose I could, but working at a very large company, I get put in front of a lot of very wealthy people who are already clients of the firm. I don't need to hunt them down. They're already here. And I'm paid relatively well for what I do, and I enjoy what I do. So I suppose I could, but I mean, practicing law, I mean, if you look at rates of alcoholism and depression among attorneys, it's one of the highest of any profession. That's because practicing law, particularly hanging on shingle, is not fun. I mean, it's a lot of work that is not pleasant. And most sole practitioners don't make very much money. Generally, the folks who make the most are the ones who come out of your top law schools and then go to work at very large firms and kill themselves for a very long time. Because when you work as an attorney, generally you're billing by the hour, which means it actually disincentivizes you to work in an efficient manner because you are billing by the number of hours that you put in. And so the lawyers who make the most money work themselves to death and for the most part hate their lives. So I don't want to do that. I'd prefer to work at a very large firm with lots of very generous benefit programs. Like they literally just cut us checks to provide childcare for our kids during the pandemic so that we could continue to do that. Just very large sums of money were spent so that we could do our job better because it's a very large company that makes a lot of money. And so they want to keep their people working. If you're a sole practitioner hanging a shingle, you have to worry about everything. You have to be in charge of your IT. You have to be in charge of your lease. You got to be in charge of all that stuff. And then you have to do all the work of being a lawyer. And unless your firm is of a significant size, you're doing a lot of stuff that is low-level, boring stuff that you can't charge a lot for. So, I mean, yeah, it holds no interest for me. I'd much rather work at a big firm and get paid well than try to do it all myself.
Okay.
It's like for your accounting majors, it's your, you want to spend your time doing the thing that creates the most value, right? You don't want to spend the classic example of, oh God, one country's better at making oranges and they're also better at growing coffee. And it still makes sense for them to divide their labor because everyone is still better off. Even if you're better at multiple things, it's better for you to just focus on the one thing you're really good at where you create the most differential and value and let other people do other stuff. I'm really good at a few things. I just want to spend my time doing that because I like it and I'm good at it and that's what I get paid for.
Got you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, comparative advantage. That's what you're.
Yeah, thank you. That's it. That's what I was trying to think of. Yep.
So
it applies to people too.
How do you go about meeting new clients in the financial advisory world, and what are some ways you've met new clients?
They get walked to my door. So I am the intermediary between advisors and the set of resources that our trust department offers. So the advisors and the clients are already here. I am just there as a resource, as well, to help them bring new folks in, but it's just as much to help existing clients of the firm find ways to engage with our trust department. So very often the clients are already here. The people who do the legwork of dragging new clients into our firm, those aren't me. Those are the financial advisors. That's why their compensation structure is different than mine. Financial advisors generally get paid directly on the revenue they generate. And I mean, if we look at our firm, the advisors, their compensation is probably the largest line item for the entire firm, because they're literally like independent contractors or entrepreneurs. They're going out and they're hunting and killing and dragging the game back into the firm to annuitize it and make money on it. I don't have to do that. I get to work with existing clients of the firm and help the advisors bring folks in, but I'm not evaluated on going out and hunting and dragging in new stuff. Instead, I get to work primarily on existing clients of the firm and helping to find ways to generate value for those folks who are already here. So most of the time I don't have to do that, which is also nice, because it is a exhausting and soul-crushing effort most of the time for most people who do it. The success rate of becoming a financial advisor at many of these firms is frighteningly low. Most of the folks who succeed do so because they're joining a team that their dad already started 20 or 30 years ago. The failure rate is very high. So I went a little off track there answering your question. It's not something that I have to worry about, because it's not the job that I do. I do a job that's slightly different.
Thank you.
How
I
is
just scared you all off being from. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Shoot.
how has automation and technology affected the financial world, and how do you see the outlook within the next 10 years as well?
So yeah, so guys who justify their fees by saying I can help you beat the market, or even worse, I can help you outperform the benchmark, or I can help you find the best managers. Anything that you can reduce down to quantitative value, right? I can do X better than Y. That's all going to get automated away. The value add for advisors to be able to justify the fees that they charge is not going to come from I can help you beat the benchmark, or I can help you pick managers, because anything that can be automated will be automated. That's why you see robo-advisors popping up. Where the value is going to be is in the qualitative. I understand your family. I understand their needs. When something bad happens, I will be there for you to help take care of you and your family. I understand you. I understand your circumstances. We come from the same background. We come from the same place. I know you as a person. I can speak to your deep needs and concerns. I can help you sleep better at night. The more you talk like a therapist and the more you think like a therapist, I think the better you are going to do in this field, to any extent to which you are client-facing. If you're not client-facing, yeah, most of that stuff's going to get automated away. If it can be, it will be, because computers are cheaper than people, and they don't sleep, and they don't eat, and all you need to do is feed them electricity, and not that much. And they're faster, and they don't make mistakes most of the time if the assumptions are right? So yeah, everything's going to get automated. Every job out there that can be automated will be, if it can be done effectively. Just assume that that's the case, right? So then the assumption is, all right, assuming that's the case, what are the things that people are good at that machines are not good at least yet? So the classic example, the job that's not going to be automated away right now, is the dentist. Because someone physically needs to put their hands in your mouth, and robots are not good enough to do that right now. So that's not going to go anywhere. Any job that requires a human being, or sort of the type of reasoning that humans are good at that people are not, and that's usually sort of emotional stuff, those jobs are not going away because you can't automate them away. No machine is going to be able to sit with you after your parents die and hold your hand and talk to you and help you navigate through that process, but people can. And there's value. There's real substantive value to that people are willing to pay for. So focus on the qualitative, not the quantitative, because machines are real bad at qualitative and they're real good at quantitative. Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
And that's actually maybe an argument for the humanities, right? If you can, again, you need to know the math, but when you're dealing with people, people make decisions as people. And so you position yourself in the value add as something that is something that only a person can do. I guess that's how I think about it. And think about where you want to be in the world, contributing in ways that only a human can. And honestly, those are often more rewarding anyway. I mean, the guys who used to work at the assembly line, putting together cars, Henry Ford had to pay them more because they hated their jobs, because it's really boring to put the same widget on the same flange over and over and over and over and over again. It's mind-numbing. The jobs you want to do are the ones that require you to engage meaningfully in complex, thoughtful communications, because those are rewarding. Anyway, so that's how I'd answer that question.
Alan, I have one question for you as well too. Like what are some things that you didn't know before getting within the financial industry that you had wished someone had told you?
Ooh, well, that's a good one. So it's not nearly as scary as it seems, right? I mean, it used to be a lot scarier, to be honest. People are a little bit nicer now and more concerned about getting sued, so they're not nearly as mean as they used to be. But so one thing is, everybody, they're all people, right? They're just people, and they got the same needs and concerns and worries as everyone else. They got kids, they want to go home. They got husbands and wives. Media, I think, sometimes portrays financial services in a certain way that doesn't align with reality. They're just human beings. The other thing I would say is that I think is really important in any job is internalize the fact that this is going to sound weird. Internalize the fact that most people don't spend that much time thinking about you. They're more concerned about their own stuff. And so when you see people behaving in certain ways, don't necessarily assume it's because they feel some way or they think some way about you. They're probably not thinking about you at all. And that you can go amazingly far in any organization by being optimistic and keeping your head down and working hard, and just being making a positive contribution to the workplace that you're in. Always having positive things to say about people, minimizing the amount of time you spend focusing on the negative, minimizing the amount of time you spend making critical comments of others. What I try to do in my job is I try to say nice things about people behind their back, right? I talk up the folks I work with. I compliment and I say, thank you for helping me out. Any big organization it's really hard to do most anything. And your coworkers can either be your allies or they can be your enemies. I work for a guy who used to constantly make slightly negative, undermining comments about everyone he engaged with. And what he did by doing that is he planted little landmines for himself all throughout his career that just were going to go off. He didn't know when, right? Because he pissed somebody off and said something negative about somebody at some point in the past. And then a few years later, he needed their help with something. And guess what? They didn't want to help him because he was a jerk. But if you go around helping people out, saying nice things, talking about how you really appreciate other people and how they sort of help you succeed. Andrew Carnegie actually has a line: give other people a reputation they have to live up to. So I always talk about how great and helpful my partners are, what a great resource are, how I really appreciate working with them. And so they come to think of, oh yeah, when I work with Allen, I'm very helpful and I'm very appreciative. And gee whiz, doesn't turn out to be true. And for the same thing, I try to do that as well. When people come to me with problems, I try to help them, even if it's not directly in my line of business or what I do. I try to connect them to someone that can help them out, and I try to help them solve the problem. If you just keep doing that and you're a positive, positive person in the workplace helping others succeed, that gets around. And if you're always saying nice things about people, I mean, when they're not around, that gets around. And eventually you become the kind of person that people like to go to with stuff. You become the kind of person that people want to succeed. I guess that's a big thing. You want to be the kind of person that other people want to succeed in the workplace, because once you are, suddenly you're not planting landmines, you're planting flowers everywhere. And the whole organization is filled with people that want to help you succeed. I think that's huge. And it's all about mindset, and it's all about approach. I mean, the world is as nice or as nasty as you see it and as you act in it. And if you act with the assumption that the world is out there trying to make your life easier and trying to help you out, and the world is filled with people that want to help you, over time that will prove to be true. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is things I wish I knew that Earlham has a certain way of engaging with people and talking to people. That way of being in the world is not the same outside of Earlham as it is inside. So again, get comfortable code shifting and code switching, because the way you're going to engage and talk with people in the workplace is not going to be the same as you were at Earlham. And you need to be okay with that and understand that. And that doesn't make Earlham's way of interacting with folks bad or good, just different. People are not necessarily seeking consensus. We will not take moments of silence. People will not hold hands in a circle around the heart in the workplace. It's just not something that happens. There are going to be people coming from really different mindsets and ways of being in the world, and that's okay. Just go in knowing that and try to be helpful. And it's remarkable how over longer periods of time, generally people who aren't jerks do better than people that are. Generally, people that are helpful do better than people that aren't. Generally, people that are super political and backstabby, that stuff outs and they go away. It may look like they're doing well over the short term, but over the long term, it's basically just nice people who work hard are the folks who succeed.
Thank you. I also just have one quick follow-up. Could you talk about some differentiating factors between living wills and living trusts?
Just differences between wills and trusts. So wills are, so a living will is actually something completely different. A living will is like, should you pull the plug on me when I'm in a coma? So generally so that's a medical document, has nothing to do with it. It's just confusingly named. So we're going to set that aside. Whereas you're talking about basically between a will-based approach and a trust-based approach. The will-based approach uses the courts and the probate system to convey assets to the next generation. It's historically how assets have been conveyed. It's the sort of the older approach. Trusts to accomplish the same thing, convey assets to the next generation, but they do so via a private contract. And what's nice about that is they are more flexible. They give you a lot more ability to control where the assets go. So the benefit of the will is it's cheaper, but that's really only the benefit. Usually wills are going to be going through the probate process. It's going to be more expensive. It's going to take more time, and it's going to be public record a lot of the time, and folks don't want those. So generally, folks with dollars are going to prefer a trust-based approach to a will-based approach, because usually it comes out to being less expensive. The process is faster, and the most important thing, the process is private. There's no record of it. And generally, folks with money don't want folks to know how much money they have. And so they prefer using trust-based vehicles to convey those assets. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Super.
Well, we are right now. I thank you again, Allen, for coming. This was a great episode of Spilling the Tea. Thank you so much for providing all this wealth and knowledge. And I know this is going to help, especially those students who aren't even able to come but may view this later. This will help a lot. Thank you for spending time with us. And yeah.
Can I make one more comment that may apply to some but not all the students at Earlham, but I think is worth knowing? So when you look at the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it's been tremendously beneficial, specifically within corporate America, which is something you may not see. There is actively a push within our organization to engage in what they call difficult conversations around issues of race, and the fact that historically the financial services industry has not done a good job of engaging with and integrating into our organizations folks from historically disadvantaged communities. What does that mean for you? Well, one, it means that financial services is actively trying to make itself a more friendly workplace for folks from those diverse backgrounds. And two, it means they are actively trying to hire folks in those circumstances. Now, COVID put a little bit of a monkey wrench in that because a lot of folks have gone on hiring freezes, but generally speaking, I would strongly encourage folks from from minority communities to actively apply to particularly large financial services organizations because they are actively looking to hire women and minorities. In fact, they have the firms have set specific benchmarks. You need to hire this many people who are either underrepresented minorities or women into your organization because our firm has not done a good job of that historically. So if any of you are either historically underrepresented minorities or women, apply extra, right? Because firms are looking to hire you because they know they've not done a good job in the past.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you everyone for attending, and for those later on, thank you for viewing. All right, you guys have a great weekend.